when you're intentionally saying, I love pushing my limits, most athletes are aware of what happens when that limit is reached. And that's something that they're willingly taking on.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, the rider want to be at Red Bull Rampage. The rider are excited. It's like a huge part of their career. For some of them, it's the reason why they have a career in the first place, or why their career has taken off is because of Red Bull Rampage. For some of them, it's why their career continues is because they still go to Red Bull Rampage. But for all of them, it's something that they want to do. And it's something that they'll do anything to get an entry for. And I would say that none of the riders get the pressure from the event to perform. They might get indirect pressure from sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, like, I don't think any sponsor or any of their bike brand supporters are telling them, if you don't perform at Rampage, we will not re-sign your contract. That might be something that's not directly said or understood in conversation, but it's the same in World Cup racing.
Yeah.
A team manager will hopefully not directly say to a rider, if at the next race you don't get a top 10, we don't re-sign your contract. You don't want to say that because then you put like an incredible amount of pressure, and then that's when accident happen. But the rider knows it.
Yeah.
The team or the brand knows it. And I think it's the same with Rampage. If you end off contract, you haven't had a really good year, you know that if you perform at Rampage, that most likely going to secure you another contract with your partners. So now, looking at what Red Bull is doing with the event, I think they do a really good job. Are there something that could be better? I'm sure. We've heard like riders complaining about the live TV. Because of the event is in the desert, there is a lot of wind, there is a lot of like outside factors that when you try to set it to live television, you want to have it like in a fairly small window, you want everything to go smooth, but the reality of the event is anytime there is a crash that delays everything, then the wind picks up a little bit more in the afternoon. There is a lot of parameter. So there is some things that can be changed, but also the reason why the event is so big is because it's live.
Well, I mean, yeah, outside of just like core pure riding that you do with your friends and do without cameras, like unfortunately a lot of these events are there, not unfortunately, but they are there because of marketability. Like the event has to, it happens because somebody has to profit and make money and pay for each element of it. So without a lot of those elements, then money's not made, and then a sponsor will be like, well, this is not benefiting me, so they pull out and the event doesn't happen anymore. So
if the event wasn't profitable, Rampage would not be happen.
It's not just giving like the riders an award for being sick. Like they are sick, but unfortunately, and this even goes for professional riding as well. Like some people show up to work Monday to Friday and they work their job. You can't just show up to the job and say, I don't want to work today. If you're a professional rider, you're signing a contract that you're going to deliver your deliverables, and they're going to deliver you what they say they're going to deliver. So it's a business partnership for professional riding. It is a job. And I don't even know where I'm going with that, but I know I spent quite a lot of time in the pits when I was watching Rampage last year. And when they build their lines, they look back and they're like, hell yeah, phase 1 done. I built the thing. And some of them, if they don't feel confident, they either do not do a run or they do one run and they pull out. Like how many times do you see a guy not do a second run? They're making that smart choice.
Yeah.
I really do think the riders, they take care of themselves. They're not being pushed. And there is medical staff there to pull riders out due to concussions. Like Cami last year, Bienve. So
everything is taken like very seriously. The event organizer take in consideration, like for example this year, everything got delayed a day because of the rain the previous day. So they wanted to make sure that riders had enough time to, especially the women, because the event was technically a couple of days early. They wanted to make sure the rider had enough time. So as far as I'm concerned, and from having done the event and from being there this year, I didn't see any red flags. Like I didn't see anything that really the organization could have made any difference. Could you put safety nets everywhere? Could you put like pads on some rocks? Yes,
No.
maybe.
No.
Maybe you could do that, but then that would defeat the purpose of the event. It's like in a freeride World Tour competition, if you were putting like safety nets above like some of the dangerous cliff. Like it's not racing, it's not downhill racing for skiing or for mountain biking where you can put like padding everywhere. I saw some comments where people were like, oh, maybe you can tell the rider to not do any trick on the first third of the course. But then you're really limiting the sport. And the idea of having Rampage, the pinnacle of freeride mountain biking, is to leave full creativity to the riders. So if you limit the riders, I do think the riders will be upset in the first place, because for a lot of them, doing a bar spin or a 360 drop is not that much harder than doing just a regular drop.
Yeah.
So if you tell them, we know you could be doing a 360 drop here and it's not that big of a deal for you, but we insist on the fact that you just have to jump straight to keep it safe. I think that goes obviously against the sport. But the biggest thing is, hearing the riders and from chatting with them, all of them are extremely excited to be there, but they're also extremely nervous to have to guinea pig and nutty. Then do the tricks.
It's scary.
But all of them want to go back. All of them want to be there. Now there's one thing. I wonder if, as we are chatting off of video, like the state of the bike industry, the state of sponsorship, being in a tricky position, I wonder if a lot of these riders are feeling the pressure from that and therefore feel like they have to push harder than they want to in order to get a better result at Rampage and hopefully sign a better deal.
I mean, I can't argue that for the riders, but from guys that are my buddies that compete there, I think like they know what's at stake, and I feel like it's so on their limit and it's so gnarly that I do think that's pushed out. Like you and I will talk later in the podcast about something that I did this year that brought me down and whittled me down to where self-preservation is all that's important. They know what's at stake. And I do believe that that's pushed out and their focus is just on riding their line and being alive at the bottom, and their families and their friends and everything. And I think that you can argue that, but I think at the end of the day, all the riders that are there are the most professional riders I know. I don't think that they're doing that. Like, yes, you do want to perform. It's human nature to perform. Social media, your brands, it looks great. But when it comes down to it, what's at stake. It's life or death. And I think that they're making the decisions smartly. The changes that can occur and may occur. I think that all this comments and the people commenting online and us chatting here, I think that next year, I'm sure there will be very good talks between the athletes and Red Bull and the event. And I'm sure those involved and those that it matters, I do believe that conversation will be sparked and they're going to listen more. And I think they'll come to a good agreement. Like, I believe that if the event happens next year, that I think that all parties involved will probably be happy with where it's going. That's my opinion. I mean, you can't not discuss it after what happened, but maybe the riders will get more of a voice.
From my first time at Rampage in 2015, I remember there was some big changes that year, and there was a meeting that was called out. There was a lot of disagreement between the riders and the organization. Everything pretty much got sorted out on the spot. There was issue with basically video rights, compensation, and that was changed for some of it was changed for that year, and some of it was changed for the following year. And from there, like, I also remember in 2016 or 2017, in the middle of the year, so like long before the event, there was a riders meeting on Zoom where everybody was discussing like a few topics in order to make everything better for the riders. So obviously the event organizer was listening. But so, yeah, when you see the comments online, And I understand how people are feeling. Obviously, seeing the crash on live TV of Adolf was horrible. In person, that was, you know,
It was terrible.
It was awful. Obviously, the true victim in the story is him. Things that could have been improved was maybe to have a delay. So, for example, have the live actually 5 or 10 minute delayed. So if something like this happened, the broadcast team will have some time to kind of pause the footage, or perhaps like put a message. The rider had an accident during his run. Medical crew is performing evacuation. We wish him the best. We'll keep you posted. Maybe that's a way to kind of like protect the viewers from.
That's a good.
From the experience that was lived this year.
Yeah,
that's really one of the only thing I can really think.
Actually, I'm really impressed. Actually, that's good. I think I have a skewed perspective on things, and not that I'm special at all, but like as a 14-year career firefighter and emergency responder, I've responded to countless trail rescues in my local area, fatalities, paralysis, life-changing events, and I see it a lot, and I'm not saying I'm desensitized to it. In fact, I'm actually more sensitive to it. It kind of F's me up more than it used to. But it's really, I can understand the reaction from the world and the community seeing something like that, because coming from someone who has seen it quite often in person, it's a horrible thing to live someone else's tragedy and feel that. Is wild. And I actually had a meeting with a guy who's a trauma therapist, and he said, like, if you witness someone else's tragedy and you feel that empathy and that pain for them, at some point you have to process that emotion. And I think the world is processing that emotion through the keyboard. And they're just like, it's so hard to process what happened, that's the outlet that people are choosing.
Yeah.
But yeah, somebody's life is changed, and it would be nice to see some changes, but yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, saying it's the nature of the sport is not a solution, but the sport is progressing. The jumps are getting bigger, riders are going faster. The streaks are, getting gnarlier every time. And now where the rider can make those tricks, for Emil doing an upper tail whip on a drop is really not a big deal. But he did it in a spot that's extremely exposed, made a slight mistake, which almost costed his life.
Yeah, that was insane.
This was, I turned my head. I thought there was no way he had survived.
I thought it was over.
Fortunately, somehow he stopped and he's heading up. But yeah, overall, I think the level has got to, an absolutely insane new reality.
It's insane.
And everybody can win. So now the rider pushing are no longer like the top 3 or the top 5. It's literally the entire field. I just don't really know. As long as the event goes on, I don't really know how you could.
Well, it's going to
change that. You could stop the event and make it maybe a video challenge, and therefore the rider will be able to take the risk exactly when they want to, maybe have more time or preparation, but then it's no longer an event. Then it becomes a video part. Mm-hmm. And the action and the riding could be equally as good or even better, because if you control the environment, if you control everything, rider might be able to actually push even more than they would during the events. So then you could argue that the risk.
Yeah, I think the only opinion that matters to me, or that I necessarily care about, would be sitting down in a room of the riders and hearing what they want, right? Like, what do they want to have? They're the riders. They're the beating heart of this event. So, yeah, I mean.
One of the interesting thing I heard is, I heard someone talking about the prize money being too high and therefore too much of an incentive to take risks. But then for years, it was the prize money is too low, and it's not worth taking the risk.
So I think that what you just nailed there is a perfect example of you cannot win. Like, that is, I have not heard that. That's actually kind of hilarious. But like, you will never find a balance. You'll never make everybody happy. That is Too much money, too little money, too much risk, too little risk, televised, not televised. It's that's insane.
Another thing that was interesting was to limit the water access. So back in the day, you didn't have water anywhere in the mountain. Then I believe in 2015 and 2014, they introduced water on the lower part of the mountain. And in 2018, I think is when they started to get water to the top of the mountain. And that like really increased the opportunity of building. So there was talk of no longer having water on top of the mountain. So therefore you will limit your ability to build those crazy lines where you could do tricks of. But the reality is that could you even ride down from the top of the mountain if there was no water?
Well, I've shot at Rampage site and filmed there, and all I can tell you is coming from a guy who's watched Rampage from the very first Rampage and then going there thinking I was a good tech rider and I was a gnarly dude, I was like sick and shaking on top of those things. Like it's so much more next level than you can possibly imagine. The one thing about having water is the ability to redirect lines because it's fall line and it's ridges, so it's pinching out to a certain area. If there's no ability to use water to sculpt a berm or to redirect you, then you're looking at maybe 2 line options, and then you're just going to have to go with the fall line because you can't put enough support for a rider. So the water and the ability to sculpt and stack allows you to like now take a ridge and ride it 8 different ways as opposed to one way.
And also like control your speed down the mountain. With the water, you can make the dirt tacky. And therefore, you can really control your speed. You're able to really creep down the super steep section, especially on top of the mountain. So if you remove the water, not only you can't really build, but also you can't ride nearly as well. So lines like maybe Aiden's that one is little, well, sorry, not little, but is double drop at the start. That was actually huge, but little in terms of size compared to some of the other features. He was able to do that because there was some moisture. If you remove the moisture and it's bone dry, those lines are not really possible. Same for the one of reed bugs.
Yeah.
On the start heading to the Goblin, you will not be able to ride that if it was bone dry. You need some moisture in order to control the speed. So you will shut down a lot of opportunities, like if you remove the water on the upper part of the course.
For example, when I went last year to go filming, I went to last year's Rampage site and I looked at a lot of lines, and of course it's easy to say I didn't do it, but I looked at a lot of lines and I'm like, I do believe that I would ride this if I had a little bit of moisture because I can't do that. I'm like, I would hit that. Like even Seminux dropping from above right down that chute there. I'm not doing that, but like I think Sorgi and whoever else like came in. I'm like, that looks really fun. I'd love to do that, but it's bone dry. I'll die. Shoot off the end.
Yeah.
So like you said, you're limiting your possibilities immensely if you have no water.
Yeah.
I don't think I like that one.
So yeah, to go back to the event, what happened was really sad. There was some incredible performance. Obviously that was overshadowed by the accident. I feel like what people really remember are the 2 like really gnarly crashes. But we've seen also some of the, best free riding we've ever seen.
Yeah.
On the women's side, the event itself was awesome.
So good.
Everybody did a top to bottom twice. There was no crashes.
Yeah.
Crashes did happen, but in training, not during the live events. And I think the riding was phenomenal. But seeing Casey's Brown crash in person was heavy.
I've seen that line.
It turned out like she was, somehow okay considering. But yeah, I don't really think I have a solution, unfortunately, and I don't think anyone does have like a proper solution. So it will be interesting to see what's going to happen next year. If you got any idea, please leave us a comment. I'll be curious to see what you think, whereas you've been to Rampage and you've eyed those lines and you've ridden some of it, or you've just never been down to Utah and you just go off what you see on the media, what you see on TV. I think your point of view still obviously matters, but without being physically there and taking part of the event, I think it would be really hard to be able to make things move forward.
Sure. Yeah, man, I think that was really well said.
Okay, now let's move away from Rampage